All right. Intro music. Intro music. All right. All right. Welcome to the Grodcast with young Greezy. Today our guest is Evan 4. If he would like to introduce himself, tell us a little bit about himself.
Sure. My name is Evan 4, the fourth iteration. I live in Seattle, Washington. I am a environmental engineer. I build fish, um, and yeah, those are the highlights, I guess.
And where did we meet?
Oh, we met at in grad school. I was doing a master's program in Berkeley. Greasy, sorry. Should I?
No, it's okay. I don't know how to turn my name off, so they'll know. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Greasy was doing PhD, and I was doing a master's, but we shared classes. So, yeah.
Why do you care about fish?
About fish.
Yeah.
I grew up in Seattle, and it's a big issue here. So I kind of always heard about them growing up, and right now for like environmental projects, there's a lot of funding in the type of work I do. So if you want to get involved with like environmental projects for work, it makes a lot of sense to do these. It's not necessarily the area that I, studied, but it's nice to be involved with like large scale projects like this. So, yeah.
So you trust the Seattle government, the local government?
I work for the county, so in a way, I am those people. I don't know
King
if I trust
County?
us though. King County, yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that, I guess.
No
So
problem.
each episode I'm gonna try and ask each guest the same 6 questions. And so why don't we just start off with the first one? Uh,
Sure.
so, Evan 4, what is important?
It's a good question. Um, I guess like broad strokes. I don't think anything is necessarily inherently important. Um, but I think if you lived like that, it would like drive you crazy, or at least it would drive me crazy personally. So like I have like self imposed sort of like maybe agreed upon delusions of things that are important, I guess. Um, and for me, um, that is uh, there's like I guess a few categories of things that I think are important. And more recently, that's changed a little bit. But one thing that I think uh, is pretty important is just like making sort of social connections and talking to other people, getting outside of your head a little bit, is something that's important for me because it's pretty easy to get wrapped up in your own stuff, and it's good to have people to bounce stuff off of.
Yeah,
And
the more you hold that in, the less it feels like real language, and the more it's just words bouncing around.
yeah, and
So,
I think
yeah.
I often like when I say something out loud, it just changes the way I was thinking about it, just vocalizing it. Um, yeah, exactly. So that's one thing that's important to me. Um, and then I also think just like the process of like observation and like just looking at stuff that's out there in the world is something that I find pretty important, um, nature or otherwise, I guess.
Hmm. Is there anything that you observe that you wish you did not observe, though?
Yeah, I suppose so. Like roadkill
Hmm.
is never fun. I also think that there are certain like human interactions that are not always fun to see. Like people can be really not nice to each other, and that's never fun to observe, I suppose. But I don't know. I think it's also important to like, when you say like observations, right? Like you think, at least I think of like looking at pretty mountains and stuff like that, which is really cool. But I think it's just as important to look at the stuff that's like less cool. Like if observation itself is some sort of value, which I've imposed it to be on myself, I also think it's important to see the stuff that's less cool. Um, I don't know. I'm not seeking out like decapitation videos or anything like that, but it's still important, I think, to,
Yeah, and
I
they
don't
would
know.
find you if you were. So, yeah,
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
the internet is a crazy place. Oop.
Yeah, it is. It's disturbing. I'd
Mhm.
say often. And that's where like I think a lot of the observation stuff, at least I have, is like I try to find it in like the real world rather than the internet. Like I don't think it you don't get the same impact of like seeing nature online, I think.
Yeah, maybe it's the three-dimensionalness that we crave. Um, have you ever thought about getting the like Apple Vision or whatever it's called? Uh,
The new shit, yeah.
yeah, you could live your whole
Um,
life in VR.
I don't know. I think it's gonna get probably like better and probably cheaper maybe. And then maybe I would consider it. But right now it just looks kind of silly. I'm sure it's cool for like movies or something. I don't know. But
Yeah, I mean, Google Glass tried to do that whole thing, and I think it's just people, no one thought it looked cool, and so it never picked
yeah,
up. Yeah.
that's a big thing. Although I recently got an Apple Watch, so I've like subscribed to giving Apple even more information about myself, which is probably not a good thing, but it's interesting. I like having data too.
Yeah, Apple would probably be the first person to know that you died.
Yeah, I know, which is not a good thing. Or I mean, probably not. I don't know. I don't know. Who knows?
It won't matter for you.
Not no.
So,
Yeah.
uh, all right. So next question. What is one of your you Evan for uh what is one of your favorite movies and why?
Oh, that's a good question. I actually like was recently thinking about this because I have you been on Letterboxd? Okay. I I've I find it kind of interesting to like log the shit so I remember which movies I've watched. It's been helpful for that. But they have like a thing about like your four favorite movies, and so I had to think about that. Um, and I think I was thinking about it more by like genre than anything because it's hard to say like one particular. Um, but one movie that like means a lot to me is Arrival with
Okay.
Amy Adams. Um, and
Is
there's a
that the
couple
sci-fi movie? Yeah.
yeah. And there's a couple reasons for that. I think like it the first time I watched it, it was like it was a pretty impactful time for me because like I was kind of blown away like in the theater, and that hadn't happened for a while, like where I'd like just been like very engrossed very easily by a movie. So like that kind of first experience colors a lot of like the way I think about that movie.
Yeah, it
Um,
has been a while since I've been blown in a movie theater too. So,
exactly.
yeah.
It helps.
Uh,
Um, but I really like the way they like approach time and language. And I think if I'd like watched that movie when I was younger, because it came out when I was in college, and I think if I'd watched it when I was younger, I probably would have like not studied engineering. I think I would have studied like linguistics just because of how cool that movie made it seem. Um, but alas, I am who I am, so I still study engineering.
yeah. I mean, you went through the whole grad school thing once, you know. I
Yeah,
feel like going back would be not a good idea. Well, maybe if like there were no longer any environmental engineering jobs, like maybe you
yeah,
could go back to school instead of just um, becoming goo.
yeah. I don't know. I don't really want to go back to school.
Yeah.
It's a lot, but yeah, I like the way that um, it talks about how we like shape our world based on language, and
Mhm.
like how big of an impact that has on our brain. And yeah, I just found it really interesting and cool.
Cool. What's your favorite language?
I think that like of the languages I know stuff about, big qualifier there. Um, I study, well, I speak English, and then I know a fair amount of French. Um,
We.
but we. I think that like Persian sounds really cool. Like people who I've heard speak it. Um, I don't know a ton about it though. I know no words in it, I don't think. But when I've heard it, I just like the way it sounds. So probably probably that. And I think French, like I know too much about it for it to be like cool anymore in a way. Like it's like I don't know. It's an interesting language for sure. But it's kind of commonplace for me right now, I guess. I suppose.
And you need like an elite language to immerse yourself in.
Yeah, I don't know. It's more just like I think languages are coolest the less you know about them. Maybe is like something for me I've found.
Do you feel like that translates to a bunch of other things? Like, are things just cooler the less you know about them?
I think they seem more magical, right? The less you
Mm.
know about them, and that kind of sense of wonder is appealing. And I mean, you can get more like the more you learn about stuff, but sometimes some of the magic goes away, and that makes it less fun. And you kind of realize how little everyone in the field knows, and then that's just kind of depressing sometimes. So, yeah,
Yeah, when do you feel like, because growing up, you start as a baby and you don't, everyone else is just not you. And
yeah,
then as a kid, your like nature is defined in opposition to what you will be eventually as an
yeah.
adult. So like, I mean, the legal age is 18, but like at what age do you feel like you were like, yeah, I'm really not a child anymore, you know?
Um,
If it has happened.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, I get you. I was reading this book actually. Shirley Jackson is like a really cool author. She wrote Haunting of Hill House and We've Always Lived in This Castle. And I liked her a lot growing up, or like when I was a teenager. And I remember reading. She has this other book called Hangsman, that's all about this like woman. Well, I guess she's kind of like a girl going to college, and it's like kind of a coming of age story. Um, and there's a line in the book where it like is talking about the first time she became conscious,
Mm.
and it's like describing it as like she was like I think like 15 was like the first time she was like actually aware of stuff, and I found that to be like really interesting, especially because I was reading it when I was like 20 or 21 or something like that. And I was like, oh, like that's such a interesting way to describe that, right? Because like when you're like young, you're still like a person, but like it's like there's like a certain time where like a different level of awareness kind of kicks in. Um, and I think for me, I wouldn't say it's like becoming an adult or something like that, but like um, when I was in high school, like freshman year and sophomore year, there was like a pretty long period of like sort of depression, and I think it was like coming to terms with that sort of a thing. And then when I started to like, kind of meet people and actually socialize, I think like 16 or 17, and like actually have um, feel like I had people who like um, sort of belonged with, I guess. That's kind of when I felt more adult like, or just like kind of fully formed in a way. Even though it's like crazy to think about now, because like I'm so different than I was then. But that's kind of like the first inkling of that, I think.
Yeah, I can relate. I feel like cuz that was like 10 years ago. Um
Yeah,
Not to out your
crazy. Oh
age,
my God,
but
dude.
yeah.
Doesn't feel like that shit. Damn.
Yeah. There's not a lot of people I still keep in touch with from that time, you know.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, we all branch, you know.
yeah, for sure.
Dendrites.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about that too, because like it's like it's like a web of people and whatever, and like you know people at a certain point of that web or whatever. And it's like, I don't know. It's weird when you like go back to like hometowns and shit, and like you see your like people again who you knew in like 10 years ago, and it's like, oh fuck, like I don't want to talk to you.
Yeah. I I feel like the people who I do want to talk to I see every time I can,
Yeah,
but like there are a lot of people who just don't come back to their hometown when I'm there, and so
yeah,
it's weird to think about like where all these people who I haven't seen in the past 10 years are now. Um,
yeah.
but so it goes, you know. All right. So question number 3. We touched on this a little bit earlier, but why do you do what you do?
Mm-mm. As in like generally or like work wise,
Open ended. Yeah.
open ended. Okay. Um, hmm. I think like I think a lot of the time I do stuff that's like um I think there's a couple of things. So like I am someone who likes to like plan things out generally. Um but oftentimes when things are everything's going according to a plan, I get bored pretty easily. And so then I like sabotage those plans in various ways. Um and so often for me a lot of like actions and stuff, if we're talking like generally, fall into like those two categories. Like a plan, there's some sort of goal, and it could be work related, it could be whatever. And then um, once I have that goal, I'll like do things to like achieve that. Um, but then I there'll be like times where it's like the opposite, where I go in and self sabotage that. For in various methods, and it's like a constant like push pull of those two
Mhm.
impulses. I feel like yeah, I don't know. That's kind of the open-ended stuff, but like I guess like for the job, like if you think about like how I do that, like the fish stuff, I build fish,
My
and it's
mother
something.
is a fish.
Yeah,
Faulkner.
yeah. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I'm basically that, except the opposite, because he was built by a fish. Um, and for that stuff, like uh, I've had to become much more like regimented, and like going like waking up at a certain time and that sort of a thing to be more successful at my job, which has been um, that sort of regimen is like nice, but also it definitely feels like soul sucking sometimes. And oftentimes during the weekend, like it's like I just like completely abandon it and like stay up later and do things that are less responsible, I suppose. And it's like a direct counter to that. Like it's the impulse sort of coming out. So that's like kind of action stuff. Um, but yeah,
You could think of it all as scheduled then in that way. If you're like,
yeah,
during the week I plan to be scheduled, and during the
yeah,
weekend is chaos, but it sounds like you're aware going into the weekend that it's not going to be like planned,
yeah.
organized, you know.
Exactly. I do like have like I mean this is more like reflection on what happens because I'll usually have like a goal for a weekend and then it just won't happen because of the chaos. So it's like a but yeah, it is in a way it is scheduled kind of.
Yeah, you need to like every now and then store that chaos into like a chaos emerald of some sort. But
Yeah.
we can't all gotta go fast. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. What do you usually do on holidays during the week, during the work week? Like, because it's inherently disrupting your schedule unless you're scheduling things on a yearly basis.
No.
Um,
Never.
Because
Um,
for me, like it really throws off the rhythm of the week, and it's almost not good. But
no, that definitely happens. I think
yeah,
like now that I am more regularly working and it's like not school, I don't have as much as of that. But like if I go on vacation, like, that definitely happens. And it definitely feels like kind of sort of insanity inducing in a way. And I feel like I need to be doing something, or I need to have like some sort of regimen during those days. And I think it leads to a lot of anxiety often, of like, I feel like I'm not doing enough. I'm not filling the day, even though it's good to just have time to relax, I think. Part of me
yeah,
just doesn't believe that, it seems like. Um, yeah. And maybe I just need a, I don't know, regimen relaxation, but that just sounds exhausting.
oxymoronic, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm. How? What do you feel like this rhythm works well with your significant other?
Um, yeah, I think more so now that we line up on work schedules, because for a while she was like bartending more, and so then our work schedules would be like the opposite, and like she'd work weekends and stuff like that, and that was kind of like it wasn't bad, but like it's much better now that we like line up on that stuff and we have like downtime together and everything. Like it's much more fun, I think.
Hmm. Cool. Yeah. Uh, it's destructive interference in terms of your wave lives when you're
Yeah,
working
exactly.
opposite schedules. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So, question four: what is one of your favorite historical figures and why? They can still be alive. They can have never existed, but
Oh, they can have
usually
never
they do.
existed.
Yeah.
Nice. Hmm. Historical figures. There are a couple for sure, um, that I find interesting. But like now I'm thinking about it, and like oftentimes they're like very shitty people historically, like they're like, um, but it's like interesting the things that they were able to like accomplish. Um, but I'm trying to think of like a specific person. I mean, I think Richard Nixon is like a very interesting person. He's like not good in any ways, in any by any means. Oh, it's kind of like obviously one of these people is way worse. So like, take this with a grain of salt. Or no, take like the comparison isn't good, but he kind of reminds me a little bit of Stalin in that they were like both drunk all the time, but also wielding a tremendous amount of power. Um,
And super paranoid.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
both, yeah, and both did like obviously I think the scale of Stalin is like way more way more horrible, because just death toll, but like both did pretty horrible things with that paranoia. Like Nixon, I think, obviously Watergate, but like I think more towards like his policy on like drugs and how he tried to use that to squash the anti-war movement is like pretty horrifying. Obviously Stalin just murdered, or like, well, they had camps, there it's horrible. So, but yeah, I find those two to be pretty interesting and compelling people, mainly because of like maybe it's like that element of chaos where they're drunk all the time, but like somehow in power and kind of for a while competently in power.
Hmm. But nothing lasts forever, you know.
No, you either get a stroke or get impeached.
Yeah, and Nixon did some good things for the environment overall.
Yeah, exactly. And like, um, he did like even like normalizing relations with China was cool. Um, I mean, foreign policy as a whole with him is a little rough, but like the China part is like probably good. Um, and Stalin, I mean, he beat the Nazis, so like that part was good.
I'll give him that. Yeah.
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 Obviously, it's not just him. It's the whole Russian, army and everything. But you know,
Yeah. Now we have neo Nazis.
Yeah, yeah, we that's what happens when you beat Nazis.
Yeah, what do you think is the answer to our white supremacist domestic terrorism problem in the U.S.?
Oh, that's a that's a hard question. I don't think I have a good answer for it. I feel like there's a lot of inbred like thought and culture shit involved. That's hard to stamp out. Um, it's also hard for me to think we don't have a great historical record with the with the stuff. So like there isn't like a record of solutions that have worked super well. Because like I often think of like this in like the micro scale of like what happens on campuses and that kind of thing or stuff like that, where there'll be like a more controversial speaker. There's protests. They don't get to speak, and then that person gets like a bigger online following because of that. You know. Um,
Yeah, when we were at Berkeley the first semester, I think there was a Milo Yiannopoulos talk that got protested and counter protested and eventually shut down. But
yeah,
last week there was a speaker from Israel coming, and that event got shut down because of the protests and the breaking into doors and it.
I saw it. I saw an
Yeah,
email about that actually.
yeah. It's
That sounds
all
like
very stressful.
yeah, no,
Yeah,
seriously, and like that was like I don't know. It seemed like Berkeley was coming pretty hard on it. Um, I wasn't there, so I don't know. Like, all I know is like from a weird email that I got that was like, because I still have my Berkeley email shit signed up
yeah.
to my, yeah. Um, I don't know. I think it's like um, that kind of cultural thing is hard because it's like, how do you fight against something in a way that doesn't like make it more powerful um,
Hmm.
on the internet? Because like I also do think there are some things where it's like um, a carte blanche freedom of speech like it doesn't work in my opinion, right? Like and something we know, like you're not allowed to say fire in a crowded room, right? Like that kind of thing. But where's the
Or
line is
bomb
hard.
at the airport.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I think in general, um, keeping stuff towards like the sort of thing where when groups try to impinge upon other people's like freedoms, that's kind of what helps because especially white supremacist groups, like they will eventually. And so I think it's like important to wait for the right moment to kind of come down hard on those sorts of things. And if you hit it at the wrong moment, it like backfires. I think it's about timing, I think. But
Is there hope?
is there hope? Um, there's a lot of reasons to not be hopeful um, about large scale stuff, which is really important because it's easy to ignore until like a large scale tragedy or like massive sort of event happens. But it's hard as an individual to impact any of that stuff. So um, I guess the only hopes that um, I think are kind of more rational is just that like in general um, historically there's always like strife moments of issue and historically humans have been able to rise to many challenges. So I don't know. It's hard like with current problems like the environmental problem or just like you're saying white supremacist terrorist groups like those are issues that haven't been really solved historically in many ways like I kind of mentioned. So it's hard to be hopeful, but um, I do think being hopeless is kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. So um, I try to not do that, or even if I'm feeling hopeless, still try to find ways to continue working or like doing things that I can for the issues I care about, I guess. But I don't do enough for sure. So I don't know. It's a tough question. Do you think there's hope?
I uh I think there's just as many reasons to not be hopeful as there's always been, you know. Um I think we're just more aware of the ones we deal with.
Yeah.
But people have gone on for a long time. So I I can still be hopeful that some people will make it through this ending of the world, even if what the new reality looks like is very different. I think we don't get to live that long, though, so. And most generational change takes generations, so. I don't know. I think there's hope, but also an acceptance that I really won't see how it plays out, you know?
Yeah, yeah, and like I think it's also I was talking about Dune earlier before the
Hmm.
recording, and have you read it or watched like any of the movies or anything?
No.
Um, it's a really cool like source material and everything, and I think the movies do a good job adapting it. The most recent movies, I haven't seen the '84 Lynch one, but I've heard that one's kind of fun and
Hmm.
crazy. But they talk about a lot about like individual like action and like versus large scale like movements and confluences, and um, I think the book's really and the movie is really interesting because it in many ways it's like one of the things that inspired Star Wars, and in that sense so much
Oh,
of modern media.
when did the first book come out?
I think it's 64.
64. Hmm.
Yeah. Um, but it's like a much more layered topic of like the chosen one narrative. Um,
The Chosen.
and the chosen, the chosen. Um, and I think it's interesting because like when I was growing up, like reading stuff and watching stuff, the chosen one narrative is so like common, and it's like this one individual making these massive changes, um, and they're able to like solve so many conflicts and everything. And I think that is like mind poisoning in a way, and like makes a lot of people think of themselves as main characters. And what's cool about Dune, at least, is like that would actually be horrible. Is like kind of the conclusion of that book. At least in my interpretation. Many people have different ones, but it's like it seems to me like the nightmare ending is like this chosen one, and like what an actual individual does, and how little of that is actually inside their own control, and versus like societal trends and everything. Um, and I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think what you're saying about acceptance of like you won't see changes, like that kind of goes into like I think that was hard for me to understand. Like that one, I won't see a lot of the change, and I won't be able to like do that much for it. Like I'm pretty limited, and I think a lot of that is just because of like the movies and other cultural medium stuff we have.
Yeah, I think all of us, subconsciously or otherwise, have ourselves following our own little hero's journey.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
uh,
exactly.
yeah,
The one
but
story.
that I think it can't hold true for everyone because some people just don't live that long to see the whole arc.
Yeah,
And
no,
I'm really interested in what like the villain's journey circle would look like because I think most villains really believe in what they're doing. You know, it's just we disagree on like what is for the best, right?
yeah,
Um,
yeah. I mean, I think a lot like oftentimes, at least how I think about it is, you know, it's the same journey. I think like it's just has a different ending, I guess, or like has
mhm.
a different maybe not. It's the same ending, I guess. It's just a different um, perspective on the same thing, maybe. And like you see
Mhm.
that as like a villain or whatever because of your vantage point rather than the actions.
Yeah, it makes me think about The Watchmen a lot.
Good, yeah. Oh
Yeah.
man, good shit. Speaking of like earlier, How We Perceive Time. That book,
Mm.
the comic is so good. Yeah.
It's Alan something, right?
Yeah, Alan Moore.
Alan
I'm
Moore.
a really big fan of his stuff. I accidentally have read so much of it. Like, he's the
Mm.
only graphic novelist I've read that's like not Japanese, I guess. Like, he's like the only one, and I've read like four of his. My uncle gave me a bunch of them when I was younger.
Is
Yeah,
he still alive?
Alan Moore. Yeah, he just does books now. He doesn't do graphic novels.
Hmm. Maybe one day you can meet him.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Um,
So, along the hero's journey in the first half or first third, however you want to think of it, there's the meeting the mentor and getting the training, like Luke in Dagobah with Yoda.
yeah.
So, along your journey, who would you say is your mentor?
Mm.
Or do you not have one?
I feel like that's actually something I've been like kind of struggling with recently. Of just like maybe it's just like a work thing. Like, it doesn't feel like I have very many people to like talk to and like learn new skills from. Like, I have to just figure it all out using the fucking internet, which is pretty
Yeah.
lonely sometimes. Um, and also just like you don't know if you're like going down the right rabbit hole, I suppose. I feel like there's been a couple of people who I've got like really good advice from, and as I've gotten older, I try to like listen to my parents a bit more about stuff because um, just realizing that some of the stuff they have said has been, I have a different perspective on it now. When I was younger, I thought it was stupid, but um, now it's a little better. But I think like there was one guy who I randomly met, and he was like basically I was at my uncle's work conference, and it was like a skiing trip when I was in high school, and he gave me like a piece of advice that sticks with me like pretty often. Um, and so I think he's like maybe the most impactful person, but I don't even remember his name. I doubt he knows me. But he was pretty drunk, and he was like, we were talking, but he was actually talking and listening to me, which was rare. Of like at that time, I was like 15 or 16, and he was, like like 50 or something like that, and they're like horse surgeons, like kind of. It's a professional conference, and he basically was like, it's really important to like everyone hits a wall in anything they do at some point, and it's really important to just try to push past that and do anything you can to push past that. Um, and I think that advice is really useful to some extent. I also think it's like, missing the picture a little bit. Like, there are some walls that it's okay to like not push past, like it takes energy to like overcome any wall. So it's more about picking which ones you want to fight against and which ones it's worth the time for. But I think
Yeah,
about that a lot.
the Delta G's, you know?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. So that guy, that random man.
Yeah. You should put him in a book. Oh, so in your free time, you are a writer. Can
Yeah,
you tell us a little
rarely.
bit about what you've been most recently working on?
Yeah, sure. I'm working on um, I want to do a thing. I've been really bad at it recently where I'm focusing more on short stories and trying to actually just get products or whatever, like get actual
Yeah.
things done. Um, because I think that'll make me feel better psychologically. And I did it 1 year, and it was like one of my favorite years for writing. Um, and so recently I've been wanting to just like explore an idea of like just like how can we make something that is like meant to be consumed as like a written thing and like has like a lot of impact in its like form rather than oftentimes I think about stories, and the easiest way for me to produce them is writing them because it's like basically free versus like getting a film crew or whatever. Like that's and I don't know how to like take pictures or anything like that. So that's often how I think about writing, but this most recent projects have been more about like how can I like use the form in the optimal way, I guess. And for one that I'm working on right now, it's about like someone who goes missing, and it kind of follows like a sort of police style investigation of reading statements that are redacted to tell the story. Um, I'm about halfway done. I haven't worked on it for a while, but I'm trying to finish it this weekend or early next week, and like um, get a good edit and like get some eyes on it soon. But yeah, that's the basic thing I'm working on right now. It's been fun when I actually am working on it. I like it a lot, but it's just hard to find. I moved recently, so I didn't have a lot of time.
How long were you at your last place?
2.5 years, pretty long time. It was nice to not move. Moving is the worst.
Yeah, I I have too much shit, man.
Yeah,
It would be
you've been at
so
your
hard.
place for what, 3, 4 years?
So it was after the year with
Oh yeah, yeah.
roommates from our program. So this would be 2.5 years in right now, I think.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, we were like the same then, that old place at the
Hmm.
same time. Yeah.
Yeah. The only thing that never changes is that things are always changing, right?
Yeah, dude. Fuck the oh not parabola, parable of the sower. It's a cool book. I would
The
recommend it.
parabola
But
of the
the
sower.
parabola of the sower. Change is God. Change is the only constant. It's a that book talks about that a lot. It's a cool book. I'd recommend it. I forget the author's name, but she's from California, but she lived in Lake Forest Park when she was writing the series, which is in Washington. Um,
Hmm.
and yeah. Anyways, another
Well,
book
cool.
reference.
Yeah, I'll put it in the link in the bio.
Good. Yeah, yeah,
um,
yeah. It's a great book.
all right. So, getting back to those questions, question 5, what is not important?
Mm. What is not important? I think I think that it's a definitely a personal thing, right? Like I definitely think things that are not important to you can be really important to other people, and that doesn't mean it's any like there's no again nothing is important in a way, so it doesn't have a value judgment. Um, but for me, I think something that is um, not important. Um, I think time is something that I value not a ton in terms of punctuality and stuff like that. Um, there's a level of importance to it, but I think being or like I'm not a military. I didn't have a military background, and I know people who have military backgrounds, and they care a lot about time, and I don't,
Hmm.
and like being on time and that sort of thing. And that definitely bothers people sometimes, but for me, I think I'm okay with that bothering people a little bit. Like I think to an extent it is important and you need to know your audience, but I'm most comfortable with other people who are also like very graceful of being on time to things and that sort of thing. um, I don't know. It does matter, but I think it doesn't matter to me very much, I guess, is
Hmm.
like um, that's that sort of thing. What else is not important? Um, Oh, I guess my sort of hot take on this is I don't think AI is important. That's my that's
All
my
right.
thought. Hmm. Yeah. Um, I can go into that more, but I I think there's a certain ceiling for technology and consciousness, and I don't think it will be surpassed. It could be, and I could be wrong, and then we could all die. I don't know, but that's my theory on stuff. Maybe it's a delusion to keep me sane, but I don't really think any of these more, especially the recent language models, are not as important as some people believe. And UFOs also, it's the same category for me. Not important. Yeah.
Interesting. But you seem to really like the sci-fi tech stuff,
Yeah,
Blade Runner
yeah.
2049 and whatnot.
Yeah, no, I
Uh,
do. I love those things. Yeah, for sure. But I think of them as fantasy, and in fantasy, yeah, it's important. It's a good thing to think about. But I guess maybe I was thinking more real world
yeah.
implications stuff. Yeah.
Hmm. I I do also worry about it sometimes as like potentially being this huge problem, but um I don't know. Part of me wants to say like the things I've seen AI do so far aren't very like meant to replace humans completely,
Yeah.
Um, but I also know a lot of the research into it's very confidential. So, like the
Yeah.
current state of the technology, I feel like um, what we know of is what was done like
Yeah.
years ago.
Yeah,
Um,
no, and I think, I think as a maybe like as a concept, um, it's interesting, and like I also think it does have implications on like, replacing people's jobs, and that part does kind of matter. But I think especially with the current like the stuff how it's currently done, I think that stuff has a lower ceiling than people think. Like I don't know that it is going to get that much better at video or writing or anything because it at least how it currently works is that like sort of predictive language shit, which just has a ceiling that um, I find it hard to again I don't study that stuff, so maybe I'm not seeing something. It could be very easy, but at least those versions I don't see much use for. Maybe there's a whole different AI that does have a consciousness, but I'm somewhat doubtful of that just because we have such a little understanding of consciousness in our own brains. I don't know. I
well,
doubt it.
the the tests in the Voight Kampf
Yeah,
test, right? Like that's measuring empathy or lack thereof. Do
yeah.
you feel like that is something we can never create artificially?
Mm, I, I never is like a tough
Or at
thing.
least our expected lifetime?
I don't think in our expected lifetime, no. Um, again, it's not my field, so it is also like the kind of thing where I'm kind of being dumb about it, where I'm just like, I just don't. It's instinct. It's more instinctual. But I just think the human brain and um, its processes are not necessarily the same as a computer, and the more we know about the brain, the closer we can get those two. But we know such little about it right now, at least as advertised, as we see, um, that I'm skeptical of that sort of thing, empathy and all that getting incorporated to a reproducible thing. Yeah,
Yeah, I think if I wasn't studying environmental engineering, I think it'd be pretty cool to study the brain.
yeah,
Um, I just feel like the more we know about how people think, the better we can optimize how we teach things, and the smarter people will be. And
yeah. Agreed.
I think knowledge really is like essential for solving a lot of the problems we have. But it is frustrating, as you were saying earlier, this feeling like there's so much wrong and only so much I can do about it.
Yeah,
Um, but we keep plucking away at it.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, and it's interesting to um, think about. Right? That's a kind of hopeless cycle of like it's really easy to see that and be like, oh, like fuck, I can't do anything, and then but then nothing gets done. It's a
Mhm.
harsh like negative feedback loop.
Yeah. I wish there were more positive feedback loops, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of negative ones.
Mhm.
A lot of negative ones.
All right, so the last question I have that I had set to ask everyone is what advice would you give yourself at age 18?
Mm,
Like when you just turn 18?
yeah. I think I would want to give myself some perspective on what like I wish I had done when I was that age, right? And I don't know if my 18-year-old self would listen to me. Like that's a whole different sort of question, but I think the thing that I think of is like I want to be more active in like um, communities that are in particular like in-person stuff. I think online communities have value, but um, it's not the same. It's not. I don't get the same out of it, and so I think I would just want to encourage myself to like, hey, maybe like school is important, but like you learn so much from different things like where you can get involved with and just like try to do more of that and less school. Whether that be, there were clubs that I joined and stuff like that, but um, now that I have retrospect, it's like I would have rather just tried to do stuff that's like in local areas, whether that be, I don't know, like even something as simple as like a food bank or something like that, or um, stuff that is, I think if you follow stuff that you care about rather than what you think you should care about, it's much more impactful. And so I would just try to steer myself more into areas that I felt passionate about. And so I could like build more base knowledge of that and then, carry that forward a bit more. I think that's like one of the most important things is like the longer you have with something, the better you get at it. So when I'm starting out at 18, it's like, hey, just try to do stuff that's like, hey, I find this like super interesting. I don't know, it could be writing groups, just something. And like I would leave that. I don't even remember what I cared about when I was 18, but I'd like leave that up to like me and just try to not emphasize a specific thing. But yeah.
Yeah, doing a bunch of shit that you don't really care about isn't always the best use of time. I agree.
Yeah, and it like it just
And
it's
just
bad
being
for everyone.
comfortable, yeah. Yeah.
What
But
you're saying, being comfortable.
just being comfortable with the fact that what you're passionate about will probably change in the future, and
Yeah.
it doesn't mean it's not worth being passionate about it in the now, but
Yeah.
time, change, importance, it's all connected.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And like how we um it also just because you give up on something doesn't mean like it wasn't valuable, that sort of thing is important. Like you get right, a lot of things matter like in terms of time and everything. It's like the most important thing is often the present because it's actually there. And so if you're getting some sort of enjoyment about it out of current present and then you stop, you don't have to force yourself to keep going. It's about those walls, right? Like which walls it's actually worth fighting for. Um, but usually if you follow like a passionate mindset and like, just kind of think about like, oh, do I actually want to keep doing this? Yeah, that kind of stuff, I guess.
Word. So,
Word.
we're running a little out of time. Is there any final thoughts before your end?
Um, I think, oh yeah, one thing I had, wait. Okay, so we're talking about those negative feedback loops and stuff. I was just kind of thinking about it. Do you think that's kind of like just like a negative feedback loop is just another way of saying like things tend towards chaos?
Um, I think it's a specific type of tending towards chaos. Um, because there can be no outside protrusion that triggers the cycle of entering chaos, whereas negative feedback loops usually involve something pushing you out and out and out, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah.
but sometimes you can just drift out. Um,
Yeah.
but I do agree that everything tends towards chaos just because
Yeah.
that's entropy, right?
Yeah.
Thermodynamics. Um, Thermodynamics was always a very like philosophical class, though.
Yeah, I know.
Uh,
It's crazy. It's philosophical with math, though.
mhm.
Like, interesting combo.
um, so yeah, I guess we'll wrap up. But this was the
Cool.
Grodcast. Thanks for being here, Evan. Uh, where can the people find you?
Dude, like nowhere. I don't know.
Yeah.
I got to think about that. Maybe one day I'll publish some stuff and I'll have somewhere to be found. But right now I'm a void creature. I'm a ghost online. I
A
don't have
wraith.
much. I'm a wraith. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. If people really want to find me, they can reach out to Greasy, and then Greasy can get in contact with me. But
Yeah, but then I get 10%. So,
exactly. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
All
Hell
right.
yeah.
Well, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
Peace.
Peace.